I never thought I'd have to say this out loud, but my boss didn't just fire me from my own project. He sent me a bill for the $80,000 bonus he stole. Let me explain, because even writing that sentence makes me feel insane. This wasn't some side hustle or pie-in-the-sky startup. It was a major corporate rollout, something my career had been building toward for years. I was the project lead, the one who kept the deadlines tight, the budget clean, and the clients so happy they were already asking about expanding the contract. My evenings bled into weekends. My phone buzzed through dinners, and I kept going because the finish line mattered. We weren't just delivering software, we were securing a partnership that would decide the company's entire growth strategy for the next decade. And the incentive was clear: $80,000 in milestone bonuses for the lead role. It wasn't charity. It was in black and white. My signature was on the agreement, alongside my boss's. That bonus was the carrot that made the 70-hour weeks worth it. The only reason I didn't walk out when my stress migraines started putting me in the ER. So picture this. Final milestone complete. Client signs off. Everything is on track. My boss congratulates the team in a company-wide email. My name is conspicuously missing. That was the first crack. A week later, I'm called into his office. He's leaning back in his chair, fake casual with that "I'm doing you a favor" tone. "We're rotating leadership for optics," he says. "You've done well, but the board thinks it's best if I take over final reporting. Don't take it personally. You'll still be on payroll." Translation: you're out. Your work is mine now. I swallowed it, because what could I do? Argue? Walk out? He was my direct line to the bonus, to my reputation, to every reference I'd need in the future. So I kept my head down. I kept working even when he locked me out of key meetings and reassigned my reports to his favorites. Then the hammer dropped. It came as a registered letter on a Tuesday evening. I remember because the envelope was stiff, almost smug, like it knew it had power over me. Inside, an invoice from the company demanding repayment of $80,000 for project cost overruns attributable to mismanagement. Due in 30 days. No appeal. Non-payment would trigger legal escalation. I just sat there staring at it. $80,000. Not only had he pocketed the bonus I earned, he was trying to make me pay it back, as if it had always been his to give. I checked the dates, the line items, the signatures, and that's when my stomach dropped. The authorization stamp wasn't mine. It was forged. My boss had signed my initials on the bonus transfer. He had already collected, and now, to cover his tracks, he was trying to push the debt onto me. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment felt smaller than a prison cell. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smug grin, his casual dismissal, his hand waving me out of meetings like I was the intern who fetched coffee. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't even going to threaten. I was going to bury him with his own paperwork, his own signatures, and his own arrogance. Because if there's one thing I learned in corporate America, it's this. Policies may protect the powerful, but receipts can kill kings. When people hear $80,000 bonus, they assume it's some magic lump sum dropped from the sky. It wasn't. It was tied to blood, sweat, and an airtight contract. Our company ran on milestone incentives. For every high-value project, we had a structure. Complete each stage on time, secure client sign-off, and the project lead earned a payout. Not in stock options or theoretical equity, but hard taxable cash. And because this was a multi-million-dollar rollout, the lead's shares stacked up, 5 milestones at $16,000 each, totaling that infamous 80. I wasn't just on the project, I was the project. From kickoff, I wrote the Gantt charts, negotiated sprint priorities, and sat through those endless 7 a.m. calls with the client's European office. When procurement dragged its feet, I was the one who stayed late, writing scope clarifications, so our legal team wouldn't choke on red tape. When the client wanted last-minute API integrations, I was the one who calmed our developers, and explained in plain English how we'd pivot without breaking deadlines. That's the thing about project leads. We're not glamorous. We're glue, and glue doesn't get noticed until someone tries to rip it apart. My boss knew the system inside and out. He'd been around for years, climbing without ever actually building anything himself. He had this pattern: let someone younger and hungrier run the project, then swoop in at the last milestone, change titles on paper, and position himself as the closer. That way, when the bonus cleared, his name was on top of the payout sheet. He called it optics. I called it theft with letterhead. But he was careful, always careful. He never outright fired people. Instead, he'd reassign them, saying things like, "This is just a rotation for visibility," or "The board wants me front and center for final delivery." The kind of phrasing that's impossible to fight without looking insubordinate. And if you pushed back, suddenly you'd find yourself misaligned with leadership goals, and your career path would start circling the drain. So when he rotated me off my own project, I knew what was happening. I just didn't realize how far he'd take it. The bonus wasn't a handshake deal, it was documented. My contract had explicit language. Project lead of record upon client acceptance of final milestone will receive accumulated incentive bonuses. That was me. He knew it. Everyone knew it. But here's the loophole. Lead of record wasn't defined by who actually led the work. It was whoever's name appeared on the final milestone paperwork. And paperwork is his battlefield. The day after he cut me out of leadership meetings, I noticed subtle changes in our project management system. My permissions on Jira were downgraded. I couldn't close tickets anymore, only comment. Meeting invites stopped, including me, though I still got forwarded action items like some unpaid consultant. Then came the email. Per leadership alignment, boss's name will serve as lead of record for final milestone reporting. Sent to the board, the client, the entire team. My name wasn't mentioned once. It was surgical. By the time the final milestone closed, the paperwork showed him as the sole lead. The payout request went straight through payroll. He signed it, collected it, all while I was still working overtime cleaning up back-end bugs to make sure the client didn't notice the chaos. He didn't even have the decency to hide his arrogance. A week later, in a celebration meeting, he ordered champagne on the company card and made a toast. "This proves we're stronger when leadership takes charge," he said, looking directly at me with that smug little half-smile. The rest of the team laughed nervously, pretending they didn't notice the knife sticking out of my back. I thought, fine, let him enjoy his illusion. I still had the contract. HR might be useless, but documentation speaks louder than champagne. I figured, worst case, I'd fight for arbitration. Then the invoice arrived, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't just theft. This was a pattern. He wasn't content with stealing credit. He wanted to bury me with the bill for his theft, make me the scapegoat for overruns he caused, and scare anyone else who might try to resist him in the future. I wasn't just a victim. I was a warning shot, and that's when something inside me snapped. The invoice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. It arrived by certified mail like something from a court. Heavy envelope, corporate letterhead, legalese everywhere. The kind of thing designed not just to demand money, but to intimidate you into paying before you even question it. Across the top, in bold, notice of repayment, $80,000 due. The breakdown was laughable if it hadn't been terrifying. Project cost, overrun recovery, $62,500. Administrative correction fee, $12,000. Leadership alignment penalty, $5,500. Due in 30 days. Payable directly to the company's treasury account. Failure to comply would result in legal escalation, including, but not limited to, garnishment, litigation, and reporting to credit bureaus. A penalty for leadership alignment. That was the phrase they used when they shoved me aside so my boss could wear my work like a costume. Now it was literally priced as a line item. At the bottom, a signature, not mine. My boss's. scrawled with my initials tacked on as though he was signing on my behalf. I felt the blood drain out of my face. I wasn't just cut out of the bonus. I was being framed for mismanaging a project I had delivered flawlessly. He'd created paperwork that made it look like I was the reason for imaginary overruns, and he was the one who swooped in to save the day. That night, I spread every page across my kitchen table. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and I went line by line, like I was dissecting a crime scene, and in a way I was, because the deeper I looked, the more cracks I saw. First, the dates didn't match. The supposed overruns were logged during weeks when I wasn't even authorized as project lead anymore. If I wasn't lead of record, how could I be responsible? Second, the ledger codes. I recognized one of the vendor IDs used in the cost breakdown. It didn't belong to our approved suppliers. It was a shell vendor, registered under a different LLC, but with the same mailing address as a consultancy my boss's brother owned. Third, the signature. He had copied my initials onto one form, but not consistently. On another page, the handwriting didn't even remotely match mine. It was as if he couldn't decide whether to frame me as complicit or incompetent. That inconsistency, that sloppiness, was his first mistake. The next day, I carried the letter into the office like it was radioactive. I tried to play it cool, but my hands shook as I slid it into my bag at security. When I reached my desk, a junior finance analyst, someone who had always been friendly in that careful, don't rock the boat way, passed by, glanced at the edge of the envelope sticking out, and whispered, "You got one too?" My head snapped up. "One too?" Later, over coffee in the cafeteria, he explained, "It's not just you. He's been reclassifying project bonuses as overruns for months, usually smaller amounts. People don't fight it. They're scared. They just pay or walk away. But I've seen the ledger. The numbers don't add up." I asked if he had proof. He hesitated, then said, "Look at the bonus transfer line. There's a tab hidden in the spreadsheet. He told me to delete it. I didn't." That was the moment my fear turned into something sharper. Because now I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And my boss wasn't just unethical. He was sloppy enough to leave breadcrumbs. I went home that night with the invoice spread across my table, the words echoing in my head: liquidated damages, alignment penalty, escalation. They wanted me to fold, to panic, to cut a check just to make it all go away. But instead, I pulled out a fresh binder. On the spine, I wrote one word: receipts. Inside, I began to build my case. Emails with timestamps, project management logs, client acceptance notes, the hidden spreadsheet tab my new finance ally had pointed me toward. Everything that proved not only that I had delivered, but that my boss had manipulated the records for his own gain. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. He thought the invoice would scare me into silence. What it really did was give me my first piece of evidence. And with that, the war officially started. If part 3 was the shock, part 4 was the grind, the slow, patient gathering of weapons my boss didn't even realize I was sharpening. The first rule I set for myself was simple: nothing verbal. Every conversation had to be documented. Every meeting request, every clarification, every refusal, it all needed to be written down. If someone tried to corner me in a hallway, I followed up with an email. "As discussed earlier today, you said..." That one habit turned whispers into exhibits. I started with the basics. 1. Email archives. I pulled every message with milestone approvals, client sign-offs, and timestamp deliverables. One in particular made me smile grimly. The client's project manager thanking me by name for flawless execution. Dated the exact same week my boss filed the overrun penalties. That was Exhibit A2, project management logs. JIRA histories don't lie. Every ticket had an author, an assignee, and a closure timestamp. I printed logs showing I had closed more than 80% of deliverables myself, long after I was supposedly rotated off. Exhibit B, 3, contract, fine print. The milestone bonus clause wasn't ambiguous. Project lead of record upon client acceptance of final deliverable shall receive accumulated incentive bonuses. My name was listed as lead on the kickoff SO. There was no clause about rotating leadership for optics. Exhibit C. 4. The hidden spreadsheet tab. My finance ally came through. He showed me how the ledger had a concealed worksheet buried under archive. In it, raw data that clearly tracked my $80,000 bonus being reassigned to a shell vendor, then marked as cost overrun recovery. The vendor's tax ID, when cross-checked, matched a consultancy owned by my boss's brother. Exhibit D. Piece by piece, the puzzle assembled itself into something uglier than I expected. This wasn't just a greedy boss. This was fraud. Still, I knew better than to storm into HR with guns blazing. HR doesn't work for employees. They work for the company. Their job is to minimize liability, not expose it. So I scheduled a clarification meeting. The HR rep smiled thinly across the table, hands folded like a school principal. "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding," she said. "Let's not escalate unnecessarily." I slid the invoice across the table, then explained why my initials were forged. Her smile faltered for half a second. "I can't speak to signatures, but if there are concerns, we recommend resolving them internally with your manager." "Everything in writing?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." Good. That was Exhibit E. HR acknowledging in front of a witness that the signature discrepancy existed and trying to bury it. From there, I tightened the net. Every email I sent was CC'd to multiple departments. Every attachment was labeled with version numbers. If they wanted to play games, I was going to make sure every piece of evidence lived in at least 3 inboxes and 2 cloud servers. And then I found the tripwire. Buried in the vendor contract was a clause almost nobody paid attention to. Audit rights. It allowed any stakeholder to trigger a third-party audit if there was suspicion of fraud, conflict of interest, or financial irregularities. Most employees never touched it, but technically, as project lead of record at kickoff, I was still a stakeholder. That was my lever. The moment I filed a preservation request citing potential fraud and copied the company's compliance office, the situation changed overnight. IT locked down email archives. Legal issued a hold notice on all documents related to the project. And, most importantly, the board audit chair was looped in automatically. I had pulled the fire alarm, and now the flames were visible to people my boss couldn't intimidate with champagne toasts or smug hallway comments. When I got home that night, I set the thick binder of evidence on my desk. On the spine, beneath the word receipts, I added a subtitle, Phase 2. Because for the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was going on offense. The first sign that the storm had broken came on a Monday morning. My boss's swagger was gone. Normally, he strutted through the office like a politician on parade, tie loosened, grin locked in place. That morning, he walked fast, eyes down, cell phone pressed tight against his ear. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a man on borrowed time. That was because the auditors had arrived. They weren't the usual in-house compliance folks you could sweet-talk over coffee. These were external forensic auditors, suits with no sense of humor, eyes that moved like scanners, and laptops they never let out of sight. They set up in a conference room and started pulling files. Payroll, vendor contracts, bonus ledgers, even Slack message archives. The whispers spread fast. A project manager from another division leaned over my cubicle wall and whispered, "They asked for all bonus approvals for the last 12 months, not just yours." That was when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. My boss had been playing this game for a while. I was just the one who finally forced the lights on. Within days, the mood shifted. People who used to avoid eye contact with me suddenly lingered at the coffee machine. A senior developer admitted he'd lost a $10,000 milestone bonus under reclassification. A PM muttered that she'd been reassigned mid-project and never saw a dime of her incentive. quiet resentment that had been simmering for months was finally boiling. And my finance ally? He delivered the smoking gun. One afternoon, he slid into the seat across from me in the cafeteria, looking pale but determined. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," he said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket, "but I couldn't delete it either." It was the raw payroll spreadsheet, the one my boss had ordered him to clean up. Hidden in its guts was a tab marked Draft, showing the original allocation of bonuses, including my full $80,000. In the next tab, that line had been zeroed out, with a note, "Reclassified to vendor account, per leadership direction." And the kicker? The date stamp showed the reclassification happened before I was removed as project lead. He hadn't just stolen my bonus after pushing me aside. He had planned it while I was still working. I sent the file to my counsel, who drafted a concise, razor-sharp letter to the company. Rescind the $80,000 invoice, cease all retaliation, pay the owed bonus plus fees, or face litigation under whistleblower protection statutes. Copies went to compliance, the audit chair, and, this was key, the general counsel of the board. That's when the panic set in. My boss called me directly. His voice, usually oily and confident, cracked at the edges. "Look, this is all a misunderstanding," he said. "Let's not drag the company into this. We can work something out." "What kind of something?" I asked, and letting the silence stretch. "A settlement," he blurted. I can get you $20,000. Cash. Off the record. You sign an NDA and this whole thing goes away." I almost laughed, but instead I hit the record button on my phone, because in my state it was legal to record calls without telling the other party. "You're offering me hush money?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. No, just a goodwill gesture," he stammered. "You don't want this to get ugly. Think about your career. Think about future references. Take the deal, sign the NDA, and you'll be fine." I let him ramble, every word digging his grave deeper. Then I said, "I'll think about it," and ended the call. That recording went straight into my receipts binder, Exhibit F. The man who once toasted himself with champagne in front of the team was now trying to buy me off like a problem he could sweep under the rug. And he had no idea that his rug was already on fire. When people imagine revenge, they think of shouting matches, slammed doors, maybe even someone flipping a desk in a fit of rage. That's not how it works in corporate America. Here, revenge doesn't look like a fistfight. It looks like policy doing the punching for you. The moment the auditors dug into the ledger, the machine came alive. First, IT pulled a full archive of emails tied to bonus approvals. My boss didn't know it yet, but the jokes he'd made in private threads about creative reallocations were now sitting in a searchable PDF on an auditor's laptop. Then procurement weighed in. They cross-checked the shell vendor he funneled money through and found the conflict of interest. The address matched his brother's consultancy, in black and white. A direct violation of company policy, not to mention basic ethics. Next, payroll froze his access. The man who strutted around calling himself the closer suddenly couldn't even log into the compensation portal. Rumors spread fast. People noticed when his company card was declined at a client lunch. They noticed when his assistant collected his laptop for routine IT maintenance, and he didn't get it back. HR, those same people who had tried to downplay my concerns, reversed their tune overnight. They sent out a company-wide memo using sterile language, pending review, administrative leave, interim leadership structure. Translation, the walls are closing in. My counsel sent a second letter, this one sharper than the first. It included a transcript of the recorded call, where my boss offered me hush money. The demand was clear: full payment of the $80,000 bonus, interest, and coverage of legal fees. Otherwise, we'd escalate to state regulators and federal whistleblower channels. That was the day I got the call from HR. "We'd like to resolve this amicably," the rep said, voice suddenly sugary. The company values your contributions and regrets any misunderstandings. I let her finish, then replied with the calmest voice I could muster. Put it in writing. Every stall tactic, every half apology, they all dissolved when faced with that one line. Because once it's in writing, it's evidence, and evidence was something I had in abundance. Meanwhile, my boss tried one last desperate maneuver. He cornered me in the parking garage, away from cameras. His face was red, his jaw tight. You don't know what you're doing, he hissed. You'll burn your own career down with this. I looked him straight in the eye and said, The difference between you and me? I have the receipts. Then I walked away. The next morning, he was officially placed on administrative leave. His name vanished from the org chart. His calendar invites disappeared. And for the first time in months, people at work greeted me without that nervous edge in their voices. He had tried to bury me with paperwork. Instead, paperwork was burying him. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice once. The official memo hit our inboxes at 8:02 a.m. sharp. Effective immediately, boss's name is no longer employed with the company. We thank him for his service and wish him well in his future endeavors. Corporate code for he's gone and don't ask questions. But everyone knew. You could feel it in the air, the way people huddled around monitors, whispering in half smiles, the way Slack threads filled with cryptic emojis. My boss, the man who once bragged that he was untouchable, had been cut off at the knees. For me, the real moment wasn't the email. It was the envelope that arrived 2 days later. This time, not an invoice, but a check. The company rescinded the $80,000 demand in writing. They issued me the full bonus, plus statutory interest, plus reimbursement for every legal fee I'd incurred. The letter was carefully worded, full of phrases like, without admission of liability and amicable resolution. But the numbers spoke louder than any apology. 80,000 became 92,000 and change. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same system he tried to weaponize against me had now turned on him. Meanwhile, the auditor's report made the rounds quietly at the top. It confirmed everything. Conflict of interest, falsified authorizations, reclassified bonuses siphoned into a vendor account tied to his brother. The board had no choice but to act. His termination was officially for cause. Translation, no severance, no golden parachute, no cushy consultant role on the side. Worse, the company's D&O insurer, the one that normally shields executives from personal liability, declined coverage. The report cited willful misconduct as grounds for exclusion. In other words, if regulators came knocking, he'd be footing his own legal bills. Inside the office, leadership scrambled to put out fires. HR announced a new era of transparency. Compliance rolled out mandatory training sessions. Procurement blacklisted half a dozen vendors linked to family members of executives. The company pretended it was reform, but everyone knew it was triage. And me? I had leverage. Part of the settlement my counsel negotiated included a neutral reference clause. HR was legally bound to provide only dates of employment and job title if anyone called. No whisper campaigns, no black marks, clean slate, I could have stayed. With him gone, my path upward was wide open. But the taste of betrayal was too strong. The champagne toast, the smug smile, the forged initials on that invoice, I couldn't unsee them. I couldn't trust that place again. So I handed in my resignation. 2 weeks, polite and professional. No bridges burned, no parting shots. Just a calm exit. On my last day, I cleared my desk, slid the receipts binder into my bag, and walked out without looking back. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving paid, vindicated, and free. And my old boss? He wasn't just unemployed. He was radioactive. Recruiters talk, and the audit report had already leaked into the industry grapevine. One company after another quietly passed on him. The man who once bragged that he made careers now couldn't salvage his own. Corporate justice isn't flashy. There's no dramatic arrest, no perp walk on the evening news. It's quieter than that. Contracts revoked, bonuses clawed back, doors closed. And as I deposited that settlement check, I realized something. I hadn't just survived his game, I'd beaten him at it. 6 months later, the chaos had settled into silence. I was no longer staring at invoices under a buzzing kitchen light, no longer dragging myself into an office heavy with suspicion. Instead, I was in a new role at a competitor. Better pay, healthier culture, actual respect. My team celebrated wins without knives hidden behind their backs. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like every compliment was a setup for betrayal. And the money? It helped, of course. I paid off debts, padded my savings, and, in a small act of symbolism, donated a slice of that payout to the Employee Hardship Fund my old company had ignored for years. If my boss had taught me anything, it was that power meant nothing without people. But karma has a way of writing the last line. One afternoon, my old finance ally, the same junior analyst who slipped me that flash drive, sent me an email, just a single line. He applied here. Guess who's reviewing resumes? Attached was a screenshot of my former boss's application to the company we now worked for. Needless to say, he didn't get the job. Rumor had it he bounced around for months, trying to land interviews, but the audit report had branded him like a scarlet letter. Executive recruiters are a small circle, and none of them wanted to gamble on a man terminated for cause, with a conflict of interest scandal attached to his name. The man who once bragged about being untouchable was now untouchable for real, just in the opposite sense. And me? I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Watching him unravel was never the point. The point was that he couldn't use me, or anyone else, the way he had again. On my desk at home, tucked in the receipts binder, there's still one document I keep at the front. The original $80,000 invoice. The one that started it all. Across the top, stamped in thick red letters by the company's legal office, it now reads, Void. Sometimes I take it out, run my fingers over that word, and remind myself of what it really means. Not just that the debt was canceled, not just that I was paid what I was owed, but that the attempt to crush me turned into the very evidence that saved me. He thought he could bury me under paperwork. Instead, paperwork buried him, and in the quiet that followed, I finally felt free.